of the Republic, which he chaired as part of the preparations for the 2025-2026 social year. In the presence of the Interior Minister Brahim Red, the interim Prime Minister called on the governors to monitor the implementation of local development projects, to speed up their completion and to remove any obstacles that might hinder them, with particular emphasis on projects related to health and education services, improving drinking water supplies and urban development. In order to enhance the transparency and credibility of national data, the current phase will see the acceleration of the digitization of the Algerian administration, said Sifi Gharib, recalling that this is a priority that the President of the Republic has emphasized in his various speeches. The interim Prime Minister also highlighted the issues of strengthening local investment through the creation of a favorable environment and the removal of all obstacles that could hinder it, with a particular focus on supporting initiatives led by young people and innovative projects.
It is important to remember the importance that the President of the Republic grants to boosting the place of investment, which requires the mobilization of everyone, including local and central authorities, to ensure an environment conducive to supporting investment and removing all obstacles that may hinder investment, paying particular attention to supporting youth-led initiatives and innovative projects. It is also necessary to insist on the fulfillment of the commitments made to citizens in order to consolidate their confidence in the state and its institutions.
Mr. Gharib said that to ensure a smooth social transition and the success of the upcoming school, university and training year, efforts are currently focused on finalizing all preparations on the ground with the full mobilization of all local stakeholders.
And now the Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, Salma Bakhta Mansouri, has affirmed in Algiers that Algeria's constant commitment to the values of good governance and democracy is today illustrated in its continental leadership. Ms. Shofi.
In her speech at the opening of the training session organized by the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union Commission, in coordination with the Independent National Authority for Elections, ANI, for the benefit of experts of the AU Election Observation Missions, AUEOM, read on her behalf by Chief of Staff Imad Slatnia, Mr. Mansouri emphasized that Algeria views credible elections as key to democracy, peace and stability, highlighting its reforms and work with the African Union, reaffirming through this workshop the role of elections in building an Africa guided by citizens' voices, accountability and sustainable development.
Algeria remains convinced that credible electoral processes are cornerstone of democratic governance, peace and stability. This belief is reflected in our national reform, our active engagement with the African Union's governance instruments. In hosting this workshop, Algeria wishes not only to provide a space of reflection and training, but also to reaffirm the centrality of elections in building the Africa that our citizens aspire to, an Africa guided by the voice of its citizen, accountable and responsive governance and sustainable development.
She highlighted Algeria's commitment to good governance, noting President Tebboun's chairmanship of the African Peer Review Mechanism since February 2025 and stressed the core team experts' vital role in ensuring credible missions ahead of upcoming elections.
Algeria has constantly demonstrated its readiness to uphold the principles of good governance and democratic accountability. Algeria's unwavering commitment to the values of good governance and democracy is today reflected in its continental leadership. Since February 2025, His Excellency President Abdelmajid Tebboune has been chairing the African Peer Review Mechanism Forum of Head of State and Government, the supreme decision-making body of the mechanism. The role of the core team expert is thus critical in upholding the quality and credibility of these missions, particularly as Africa prepares for a significant number of elections in 2025 and 2026.
Mr. Zlatnia then on her behalf announced the launch of the training session, which will continue until next Wednesday. For her part, the head of the Democracy and Elections Unit at the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the AU Commission, Karen Kakashi Siaba, thanked Algeria for hosting the training, noting its long-standing support for democracy in Africa, which has bolstered AU initiatives and highlighted ANI's efforts as proof of Algeria's steady commitment to strengthening electoral capacities on the continent. In the same context, the acting president of the ANI, Karim Khalfan, emphasized the importance of this first training in Algeria, noting it reflects openness to partners and a shared will to enhance cooperation in strengthening democracy and electoral practices, while also highlighting Algeria's commitment to African affairs, peace and security as vital for the continent's sustainable development. He affirmed that by organizing this training, Algeria is helping to strengthen African capacities in training elections observers, supporting efforts to promote good governance, democracy and the rule of law.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and now the chairman of the board of directors of the Kuwaiti company Metro Holding Company, Sheikh Mish'al Al-Jarrah Al-Sabah, has expressed the company's desire to implement an ambitious investment project in Algeria involving the production and export of hydrogen. The announcement came during a meeting with the Minister of State in charge of Energy, Mines and Renewable Energy, Mohammed Arkab, as well as executives from the sector dedicated to examining opportunities for cooperation between Algeria and the Kuwaiti group, particularly in the field of renewable energies and the development of green hydrogen projects. Algeria, represented by the High Authority for Transparency, Prevention and Combating Corruption, is now taking part in several UN meetings in combating corruption and asset recovery in Vienna, Austria. In addition to representatives of the High Authority for Transparency, Prevention and Combating Corruption, the Algerian delegation includes representatives from the Ministry of Justice and the Command of the National Gendarmerie. During 5 days, the states parties will continue discussions on the next stage of the mechanism for reviewing implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. To Palestine, now at least 12 Palestinian civilians were killed today as Israeli bombardments targeted residential homes in the Gaza Strip. Amid the fatalities, or among them, were 11 Palestinians from a single family who were killed when their home was struck in the Al-Darraj neighborhood east of Gaza City. In a separate incident, a Palestinian civilian was killed in an Israeli strike that targeted his house in Al-Bureid refugee camp, central Gaza. Medical sources reported that the death toll from the Israeli aggression on Gaza has risen to 63,633 Palestinians. Belgium will recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly later this month, while imposing firm sanctions against the Israeli government.
Belgian Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Maxime Prévost has announced that his country will recognize the state of Palestine at the UN session. He wrote on social media that the Israeli occupation will face 12 sanctions from Belgium, including a ban on the import of products from illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, and a review of public procurement policies with Israeli companies. Prévost said Belgium was making the pledge in light of the humanitarian tragedy unfolding in Palestine, particularly in Gaza. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs welcomed Belgium's announcement and called on other countries to follow suit to intensify practical efforts to stop the crimes of genocide, displacement, starvation and annexation, and to open a real political path to resolve the conflict. It said it considered the move to be in line with international law and United Nations resolutions, and protective of the two-state solution and supportive of achieving peace.
Meanwhile, Palestinian medical sources in the Gaza Strip said that 13 Palestinians, including 3 children, have died due to famine and malnutrition in the past 24 hours, and this brings the total number of victims of famine and malnutrition to 361, including 130 children. And British Foreign Secretary David Lammy said that the famine in Gaza is man-made, referring to the systematic starvation imposed by the Israeli occupation on the Palestinians, expressing deep anger at the Israeli government's refusal to allow aid into the Gaza Strip. In a speech during a session of the British Parliament on Monday evening, Lammy stressed the need for a comprehensive humanitarian response to prevent further death in the besieged Gaza Strip. He said that this is a man-made famine in the 21st century, and the Israeli occupation's refusal to allow adequate aid into the Strip is outrageous. To Afghanistan now, the UN humanitarian coordinator in the country, Indrika Ratwat, confirmed that blocked roads leading to areas affected by the earthquake that shook eastern Afghanistan near the border with Pakistan pose the biggest challenge for relief teams. And Jamal Salmani tells us more.
The UN official said that the earthquake, which measured 6.5 on the Richter scale, caused extensive damage to infrastructure, including roads and bridges, and destroyed many homes.
One thing really important to remember in this earthquake, as opposed to what happened in Herat in the west, is this is extremely mountainous, and due to the earthquake there's been lots of landslides, rockfalls, etc., and access has been very limited to everybody in the first 24 hours. This has posed a huge challenge to us as we deploy. Right now, as we speak, 20 of our emergency assessment teams have been deployed to do assessments, which is critical in these areas. 15 mobile teams have been put out there, and UNHANS, the humanitarian flights from Kabul to Jalalabad, which is the capital of Nangarhar province, closest air logistics, is mobilizing more flights. However, the biggest challenge is to reach these remote areas with the road access extremely damaged. We need helicopters because fixed-wing aircraft cannot do the job. And the government has responded by deploying 3 helicopters constantly to evacuate individuals who are injured, deploy search and rescue teams and medical teams.
The earthquake that struck eastern Afghanistan killed more than 1,400 people and injured more than 3,100 others, according to an official toll updated on Tuesday, one of the deadliest in recent decades in the country, which is among the poorest in the world.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and that's it for our news bulletin. And as part of our coverage of the Intra-African Trade Fair, I invite you to listen to this interview compiled and presented by Mohammed Khatel.
The 4th edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair, IITF 2025, the most important and most strategic African event